Elias Thorne stood over the paralyzed High Arbitrator Vexia, raising a jagged, burning branch against the darkness as the obsidian stalkers closed in for the kill. Their compound eyes pulsed with a bioluminescent hunger that mirrored the cold stars above. "Stay behind me," Elias rasped, his knuckles white against the charred wood. He didn't look back. He just waited for the lunge. Have you ever wondered what happens when a species forged in a Class 9 death world is finally pushed to its limit? Let's go back to the beginning of the end. The steam from the chipped ceramic mug was still rising 3 hours before the conclave officially convened. Elias Thorne held the handle with a thumb that bore a jagged scar from a world far harsher than this crystalline station. Var watched from the junior scribe's tier as the human took his place at the central podium. In a hall spanning 3 kilometers of polished crystal and flowing light displays, Thorne looked like a smudge of gray lint on a silk tapestry. His suit was functional, devoid of the bioluminescent armor or shimmering robes that defined the other 47 species. The air in the assembly was thick with the scent of ozone and the heavy expectation of a rejection. To the hegemony, Tier 2 status wasn't just a label. It was a mathematical threshold of biological and technological efficiency. A species needed to prove they could maintain a self-sustaining colony for over a century without external support, demonstrating a mastery over their local entropy that humans, with their brief 80-year lifespans, seemed physically incapable of achieving. The hegemony calculated worth in millennia. Humans measured it in breaths. Var's ocular implants struggled to reconcile Thorne's resting heart rate with the hostility radiating from the Draconis delegation. High Arbitrator Vexia of the Draconis hegemony has the floor, the Echo of Ages announced, its crystalline structure pulsing with a neutral violet hue. Vexia rose with a fluid, predatory grace. Her scaled skin caught the light in shades of deep emerald, and her neck frill extended in a display of aggressive superiority that made the data stream in Var's mind spike with cautionary alerts. She didn't walk to the podium. She descended the steps like a sword being unsheathed. "Humans wish to be granted Tier 2 status," Vexia said, her laugh musical and cold. "They who have existed for a mere 300,000 years. They who still war over resource ideologies and invisible lines on their single primitive world." Elias stood perfectly still. Var noted that the human's pupils didn't dilate. He simply watched her, his expression as unreadable as a basalt cliff, which meant the readings were wrong. Var's sensors indicated Thorne was experiencing significant stress, yet his hands remained clasped behind his back, steady as a heartbeat. A low, rhythmic thrum. Var realized the human was tapping a rhythmic sequence against the back of his hand, a mundane tick that seemed absurdly small in the face of Vexia's contempt. "They are mayflies pretending to be dragons," Vexia continued, her tail swishing in agitation. "They bring us nothing. No unique technology, no cultural wisdom, nothing but their desperate need to be accepted by their betters. If you're finding this account of Terran defiance compelling, subscribe now to ensure you never miss a chronicle of the extraordinary. Let's return to the trial." "We endure," Elias said quietly. The silence that followed was heavy. Vexia blinked, her frill twitching in a way that Var interpreted as genuine confusion. Then she laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "How wonderfully modest. Every species endures, Dr. Thorne. It is the bare minimum for existence." But Thorne didn't flinch. He met her gaze with a tired intensity that made Vexia's frill twitch involuntarily. She leaned in close, the strange spice scent of her breath reaching even the lower tiers. "I challenge you to a trial of merit. Prime V, the Crucible Moon. 72 hours. If you survive, I will personally sponsor your petition." Elias didn't hesitate. "I accept." Var's monitoring station buzzed as the feed from Prime V translated into a frantic stream of data. The Crucible Moon was performing exactly as intended, its 30-hour rotation punishing the biology of the participants with extreme thermal shifts and a thin, oxygen-starved atmosphere that made Vexia's high-altitude filters work at maximum capacity. Thorne was a different matter. He didn't have filters. He simply breathed, his chest heaving in rhythmic, heavy cycles that suggested his lungs were pulling more from the air than the hegemony's chemical analysts thought possible for a carbon-based lifeform. Var zoomed in on a loose thread dangling from Thorn's gray cuff, a mundane imperfection that seemed to mock the sterile, high-tech environment of the hegemony's observation deck. The human moved with a deliberate slowness, saving every calorie, while Vexia's suit burned through its energy reserves just to keep her core temperature stable against the biting cold of the lunar night. Suddenly, the sensors screamed. A solar flare, massive and unexpected, slammed into Prime V's metallic crust, creating a localized electromagnetic pulse that bypassed the station's dampeners. Var watched in horror as Vexia's telemetry turned to static. Her armor, a masterpiece of Draconis engineering, seized into a protective but immobile lockout state. Her life support systems flickered once before dying, leaving her trapped in a dark, pressurized shell, which meant she was bait. The obsidian stalkers emerged from the purple tree line, moving with a coordinated, silent hunger that made the junior scribe's scales itch with sympathetic terror. Thorn didn't wait for his suit to reboot, mostly because he wasn't wearing one. While Vexia remained trapped inside a suit that had become a literal coffin of emerald-colored alloys and frozen circuitry, Elias Thorn moved through the undergrowth with a silent, terrifying fluidity that suggested he had spent his entire life anticipating the moment the lights went out and the world became a hunting ground. He didn't look like a mayfly anymore. He looked like the reason the dark was something to fear. And now, on the surface of Prime V, Var watched through the flickering monitor as Thorn stood over the paralyzed High Arbitrator. The context of his fragility had vanished. He wasn't a diplomat anymore. He was a vanguard pathfinder. He struck the flint from his kit with a practiced, violent motion, catching the spark on a bundle of dried moss before igniting the jagged branch. The fire blossomed, a primal light the stalkers couldn't understand. The obsidian stalkers shrieked as the heat hit them. They were creatures of the dark, evolved to hunt via thermal signatures and electromagnetic pulses, and the sudden, primitive roar of combustion was a sensory overload they couldn't calculate. Thorn didn't just hold them back. He hunted them, using the light to blind their compound eyes and the smoke to mask his own scent. He moved between the trees like a predator that had finally found its home, his gray suit blending into the shadows until only the orange glow of the flame remained. He was a ghost. "My world is a Class 9 death world," Elias said, his voice carrying over the crackle of the flames and the low growls of the retreating pack. He looked down at Vexia, who could only watch him through her helmet's HUD as he cleaned a deep gash on his forearm with a casual indifference that suggested he'd survived worse before breakfast. "You mocked our lifespan, but we live 80 years in a place where the weather tries to level our cities and the very air can be toxic. We didn't come here to ask for your permission to live. We came to tell you that we already have." The conclave hall was silent as the echo of ages finalized the unanimous vote. Var watched Thorn pack his simple gray suit into a bag, his movements slow and methodical. On the table lay the fire-starting kit, its flint worn and its metal scratched, a primitive relic that had rewritten the galaxy. A single, jagged scar on Thorn's hand caught the crystalline light. The hegemony now knows that the most dangerous things in the universe don't always wear armor. Join us tomorrow for another chronicle of the extraordinary. If you were Vexia, would you ever trust a quiet human again?